Good. Yay. Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Prickly Pear and our distinguished panel for today's discussion of communication in the context of neurodivergent leadership. And as part of our series, the Neurodivergent Leadership Wheel, I am actually going to start us off with a disclaimer, or what I call the social context awareness, right? So before we jump into specific examples as part of our discussion today, I want everyone joining us here today to be reminded that neurodivergent individuals, particularly those with autism, may excel in understanding the social cues and communication styles of other neurodivergent individuals. Similarly, neurotypical individuals might find it easier sometimes to connect with others that are also neurotypical. So the challenges arise really when individuals from different neurotypes try to understand each other. And that's the gap we want to explore here today. At Prickly Pear Consulting, Ken and I started with the idea of All Brains Belong, and we started specializing in and building leadership journeys around one-on-one leadership coaching for highly gifted senior neurodivergent leaders in organizations. I am Petra Russell, co-founder of Prickly Pear Consulting and a leadership coach in various industries with typically engineer-heavy audiences such as tech, automotive, and aviation, where I've been supporting many exceptionally gifted leaders for the last 10 plus years. And it is my privilege to moderate today's discussion. I want to give each of our panelists a moment to introduce themselves, and passing it over to Bruce Hostetter, who is joining us today from Portland. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Petra. I'm Bruce Hostetter. I'm a PCC certified coach through Invite Change, which is up here in Washington State. I'm also trained as an ADHD coach, and a part of my evolution has been to move on to health and wellness coaching, and also organizational wellness coaching. I come to this as an adult who was diagnosed late in life, and through the progress that I've made in the training that I've had, been able to work with other people who identify as ADHD or somewhere on a spectrum to make a difference over time. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, finding out more about Prickly Pear. Meredith.
Hi, it's Meredith Kanan, and I have a signature membership, the Differently Wired Business Membership, for all of us who have differently wired minds who are starting and running our own businesses as entrepreneurs and CEOs, so that we can create offers and programs that are aligned with our differently wired mind.
Awesome, Meredith. Hi, Ken Carlson, co-founder of Prickly Pear. I've been coaching for 17 years with leaders all over the world, actually, and specifically in tech mostly. And because of that, I've got to coach many, many leaders who are, what we would say, are neurodivergent or have neurodivergent traits. And what I've discovered is that the intention that those leaders have is to be the best version of the leaders that they can be, and they're not always aware of the impact that they're making on others. And so coaching makes such an impact with them. And I just love being in those journeys with individuals to help them discover themselves, and then to take the actions that make them better leaders and make their companies better, whether they're entrepreneurs or senior leaders at small or large organizations. So Ken Carlson, thanks. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to get us started here in a second. Just wanted to, again, set a little bit the stage here today for our discussion of exploring challenges and nuances of both written and verbal communication. And challenges faced usually when we think about what we may have come across. We see sometimes struggle with interpreting social cues. We see sometimes struggle, particularly in our coaching work, with maintaining focus, or processing verbal or written information, sometimes regulating information, emotions, and managing cognitive overload. Some of these challenges can definitely lead to misunderstandings. They can lead to conflicts, particularly in the workplace, and feelings of exclusion, which we're all here today to show some ways of bridging that gap. As you may know, neurodivergent clients often have received feedback that they do not communicate well. And this may look like, for example, someone with ADHD who needs to share all of the context. That can be a little bit overwhelming for people around. Autistic person who has not so much an ability to read between the lines, which is what we often expect in our communication, or just, skipping steps in their explanations, because of course their thinking is already so many more steps ahead of us. So in coaching, for example, we come across moments where we have to really remember that not all of it is a linear thinking process. And that, again, we, as I said earlier, at Prickly Pear, we really believe all brains belong. So the trick here too is that we're not really looking at forcing into linearity, but more dancing in the moment and asking more clarifying questions maybe in that moment. And that's us with our coach hat. But I wanted to allow Meredith here to jump in. She has a little excursion here for us as well as we kick off. So I hand it over to you, Meredith.
Well, I think it's interesting because, like you said, sometimes our conversations aren't very linear. We love to give lots and lots of information, but sometimes the context and the information that we're giving doesn't make sense to the other person who's landing. And I think one of the challenges, not just for neurodivergent folks, I think this is a challenge for everybody, is really being able to communicate what we need, right? Whether it's the conversation of what we need to get a particular task done inside of our everyday life, or a task done inside of the business that's been assigned to us. And really having some clarity on this can make a huge difference in communicating. And I wish I had been given this tool at a much earlier age, because I think it makes a difference for everybody, but especially for those of us that have things that disable us inside the workplace. If there's too much overstimulation and you can't focus or think, or some of those things, being able to articulate and advocate for ourselves to get these needs handled, any type of accommodations, etc. So I have a really clear process. There's 5 things we need to know to really help get that clarity, and a nice kind of structured conversation to really help advocating for our needs. And so it's being really clear on I'm going to go through the 5 things that we need to know and get clarity, like what is the disabling situation, whatever's causing us to be unwell, off balance, zaps our energy and steals our spoons, right? Then being able to
Hey,
clarify.
Meredith, can you give me an example of that? Like what's a disabling like what's something that zaps our spoons?
Okay, great. So, right, it could be if you're working in a cubicle, for example, and there's just a lot of ruckus and noise, or it's a very talkative day, and people are having a conversation right in front of you, those types of things, and you might be ADHD like me, who wants to jump into the conversation, but you really need to focus because you have a project or a deadline. Right. So being able to clearly communicate it without going, "Buzz off, dudes," which would be rude and kind of where our instincts might have us do that. Right. Being able to address the situation and go, okay, this noise is too distracting for me. This area or this cubicle isn't functioning for my brain and what I need to get accomplished today. Right. So that might be a disabling situation that's zapping our focus or zapping our energy. And then being clear on what the accommodation would be. So in this example that we just made up, it could be that I need to move to a conference room for the rest of the day where there are no distractions. Or I need noise canceling headphones so that I can, right? So people don't think it's rude at work, right? So being able to communicate these needs and the people who are involved right? And how that situation is impacting you, right? So for those of us that get overstimulated, right, that right, prickly pear, I love the prickliness, right? Like all of the forks that are zapping our energy that we can't handle and manage through the day that are then stealing our spoons make it even harder for us to function through. So the idea is that once we're clear on what that disabling situation is or the challenge area, and then what's the accommodation, what's the need that we need to have managed, and then how does it provide us, right? So when we're communicating, right, we can say, if you let me have this conference room for the day, then it provides me with a quiet, focused environment so I can be more efficient in getting the task and the project done that helps the whole company, right? So
Nice.
that also helps communicate it in a way that helps benefit the people that you're asking for your needs and your accommodations, right? How does this work in conjunction and create that experience? So it's both the need being met, the experience and how it makes me feel so that I'm calm and peaceful so that I can, right? So that the benefits are clearly laid out. So that's the next part that you want to have is how does it benefit me? How does it benefit us as a whole inside the people that are in this conversation or where you're asking for the accommodation or need to be met? And then really being clear on that it creates that win-win situation and what's possible, right? And because I can do this, I can get it more done, and I might even be able to do this other thing because I've got a super hyper focus going on or something to that effect. So having all of those 5 things clearly laid out makes it so much easier to communicate. And then where we really create partnership is this sentence that I think everybody should utilize, which is, what do you need from me? Like, what do you need me to say or what do you need me to do so that you can provide me with this accommodation? Right? So an example, I get accommodations for my kids at school, and sometimes the things I had to provide were the doctor's assessments and some paperwork. I had to do full medical histories, right? Or sometimes it's I had to buy an extra badge for my kid at school for security purposes, right? So it's those types of things to create that win-win partnership in getting those needs and accommodations. So I think that structure can be really helpful for the people who are linear to get real straight clarity on how we communicate and how we advocate what we really need. So that's really what I wanted to share in terms of communication. It's a a tool that I have in my tool belt that I love to give people. And regardless of your neurotype, I think it makes a huge difference to be able to communicate, what you really need and how it helps, right? Just all that stuff. Because people want to provide you with what you need to get stuff done.
Right. If you're watching this video on LinkedIn and want to have access to that tool, Meredith, how would they get that access?
Well, I'm in the process of recreating it, but it will be available at meredithkanan.com/advocating. No, yes, /advocating. I'm like, I'm making it up as we go along. So I think that would be a really good, yes, that's going to be it. /advocating.
Thank you.
We'll have the information to contact everyone at the end here when we wrap up. So there's another way for everyone to be contacted directly as a result of our discussion today. I may hand it over to Bruce. I see you in thought over there. Wondering, Bruce, what pops up for you when you think about typical challenges in communication that you may have come across?
Well, actually, I'd like to respond to what Meredith is talking about and use that as a way to convey what pops into my mind. I love the system. I like that it is something that works for everyone, and especially is something that gives a non-neurotypical person tools to communicate with somebody maybe neurotypical. The challenge or the opportunity and the challenge that I see that comes with that has to do with my observation among many of my clients around self-esteem. And so if you're somebody who has a history, you're ADHD, you have a history, going through grammar school, high school, and being somebody who creates problems, and then you come into the workplace and you have special needs because the lights are too bright, because somebody's playing music and it's just too distracting. And all of a sudden your productivity goes down. You're called to task for that. And it's sometimes, if you're the only one, hard to really explain, well, this is what I need. So for some people, I think it's difficult to get to that level of assertiveness, because you're really talking about a toolkit for assertiveness, to feel like you're entitled to have these needs met. So that's one challenge that I think can be addressed when there's an open conversation around the people's needs that are in the organization. The second thing is, I think of group and team coaching, where one of the fundamental components is agreements. And agreements are not just for the leader, the facilitator, it's for everyone to understand so that you can self-organize in an office situation. And very often in the workplace, nobody thinks of that. It's
Mm.
like our culture is not agreement based. And so I
Yeah,
can
it's
see how
expectation
what
based,
you're,
right?
it's what?
It's expectation based, right? Not
Oh, I love
agreement
that.
based. Yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna think more about that. But if you have an organization where, to lay the groundwork, you begin with what would happen if we had a meeting in which we formed agreements about how we are with each other, and you can express, I found that when I have these accommodations or have the opportunity to speak, that it really facilitates my productivity and that benefits myself and everyone. Somehow I think agreements and recognizing the issues around self-esteem are big issues.
Mm.
And if anybody has
There's
any
a
comments on
Yeah.
that, I have more to say about self-esteem, but that affects
yeah.
communication.
I just want to say something about this expectations versus agreement thing that I added to your agreement thing. I actually have a little talk that a guy named Steve Chandler put out about expectations versus agreements. I'll put that on the LinkedIn post for this meeting. I think it's a valuable resource for people to understand how do we go about making agreements, because you know you know our disappointment all lives in those places of we have this expectation. We have the expectation from each other. I have expectation that you're going to communicate at this level, right? You should communicate the way I communicate, or the rules that I made up, or that I've had in my head about how people are supposed to communicate in the marketplace. I was just talking to somebody today, and a neurodivergent leader was uh, behaving with his communication in a way that wasn't acceptable, but that level of unacceptability was supposed to be assumed. Like there was this assumption, well, you don't do this thing, you don't send an email at this time of day, to people that are above you, right? Like that's just an assumption, right? And how do we make it so that we understand the agreements, so that we're in a much better place with each other? So yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Sorry.
No, I think it's great. I think it's fabulous, because I think both of what you guys are saying in terms of the having that confidence and self-esteem to be able
Mm-hmm.
to have that, and or the courage to say, oh, I didn't know that was an expectation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both challenges seem to hit us in different places, and then especially when you do something that is an unspoken
Mm-hmm.
expectation, not knowing that you broke an unspoken expectation, the challenge then also kicks you back into that level of, I don't have confidence, and I don't have, right, the ability to then say something and speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Deep.
Yeah.
Kind of related to this, what I found in the workplace, my background is design, architectural design, spent many years
Mm.
in the field of architectural lighting design. I worked for a small firm. I was a design director. And what I noticed was a pattern with people that I worked with over time, where I could be very frustrating to my boss,
Mm.
to the coworker that I'm working with, a leader. And I discovered that with certain teams, certain relationships, when my leader recognized that I had something of value, something of unique value to add, they would be willing to be more tolerant and willing to explore more options when it came to figuring out, well, what's really going on here? And an example is I would write reports or I'd do business letters, and I would have the owner review them, and he'd go, "This doesn't make any sense." And he finally figured out, you're a really good writer, but the organization sucks. So here's what we're going to do. When we do letters, I'm going to do an outline, and then you fill out the outline. So he provided the
Mm.
structure that made sense of it. And then I added the art, the poetry that turned it into something that was flowing. But that doesn't
Mm,
happen unless the leader recognizes that someone else has something of value that makes it worth looking for those kinds of negotiations.
mm,
Good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
point. What maybe comes up here for me too is when we talk about challenges in general. So what I may be able to add here is we oftentimes as neurotypicals we kind of operate on based on assumptions, right? And what we're assuming is sometimes just by looking at something that maybe our neurodivergent counterpart isn't paying attention, right? Just because there is no conformity to what, and that was mentioned already, to these neurotypical norms that we're expecting to be, the main framework. Basically, who are we to expect that's the way that needs to go, right? So I think always flexibility here and making sure we're not running on assumptions that basically do lead then to misunderstandings, right? Because we're starting to interpret what we see in the wrong way. Another thing that came up here for me is definitely, and I know Meredith touched on this, as far as clear communication, right? So oftentimes neurodivergent leaders and folks that we work with really struggle with euphemism, sarcasm, vagueness in communication. Everywhere there is like this kind of gray zone out of a sudden. That can cause oftentimes, I see, confusions and misinterpretations, particularly in team environments. And I know Bruce touched on the team dynamics there. Another thing that came up for me is really flexibility in terms of, how does energetically speaking, how does the state of a neurodivergent individual or leader can vary, right, based on being affected by sensory inputs and leading, to inconsistent communication patterns. So we all don't show up the same day, but we certainly notice those nuances, right? We're like, what happened here between this morning meeting and the way person can show up and communicate later in the day? And again, to Bruce's point, right, how do we communicate more comfortably and with more self-confidence about what we need in order to contribute at that higher level that we know is there for them. And finally, of course, what goes hand in hand with that is that lack of disclosure, right, that we often come across, particularly in our coaching, and notice that, many of our neurodivergent and highly gifted individuals feel unsafe maybe disclosing, right? Again, back to the needs and how do we communicate and create understanding around what needs to be happening here in order to accommodate and adjust and adapt a little bit. It's a two-way street, right? That we always have to remember, even though we always come into this space a little bit with the entitlement of finding one side has to accommodate more so than the other. So we're really working here too with all of the topics that we've touched on so far. How do we bridge the gap and how do we create more awareness around that this is a two-way street, right? We all have to come to find a place that works for us more in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really valuable in what you're saying, Petra, especially in how it ties to what, like, Bruce's example was, that that gap starts with those individuals that see the value, that are safe people to start talking to in those little baby steps to make and practice being able to get things, asking for your needs and getting them done, just like Bruce's supervisor was like, here, I'll give you an outline. And this is right, just that little accommodation to make the communication more streamlined and clear can make a huge difference. But as Bruce was saying, right, he valued, right? He could see the value, and that inherently provides a little bit of that, okay, I can speak up. I have a little more area to be able to communicate, because there's that extra little sense of, okay, this person's a little safer than maybe somebody else in the organization.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that actually, just to say that that's really the gift of coaching, is to create a safe person, a truly safe person that this leader can be with and talk about anything, explore all the things that are going on for them, and that's part of the idea that we don't require anybody to self-disclose. No self-disclosure is required. We can be a coach for individuals that they want support. And we don't have to say, you want support because you're dyslexic? Okay. We can say, you want support. And then in the process, with the safe space that happens in the coaching, maybe that we get the courage to ask for some sort of accommodation for some communication issues, because it takes them twice as long to do the research that's needed in their job because they're dyslexic. Well, we don't necessarily have to tell your boss that you're dyslexic, but we can ask for things that are going to make a difference for you. So yeah.
Well said, Ken. Definitely asking for preference, right? So when we think about some of the points here we want everyone to take away from this discussion today, any one point, Bruce, that you would like to make, like just for everyone to keep in mind, if that were the one thing you would take away, what would you say for everyone to keep in mind and front and center when communicating with someone on the team that is neurodivergent?
But if you can't really ask for what you need, to remember that there are communication systems, things like NVC, nonviolent communication, assertiveness patterns, that may give you the confidence to reach out and say what you need. And it's really important to do that. That's the starting point.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah. Meredith, what would be your one point you would like for everyone to keep in mind after listening to this today?
On top of what, Bruce is saying, I think it is, the most important thing, especially if something is damaging and harming you, that you need to be able to get to that place of like homeostasis to be able to function. And so if you're not there, there's a need that needs to be met. And to ask for it imperfectly, to just start practicing, to just get out there and rumble with some courage to ask for what you need, as messy as you can, and just, you'll get better at it the more you try it. So just go for it, even if it's totally fumbled and bumbled.
I love that. I may not get this right, but I'm showing up for it. Here it is.
Trying.
Experiments never fail is the is an expression that I love. Experiments never fail.
Definitely. I wanted to just share, disabled. Ken, if you could just give me a chance here to share our reel. I wanted to let everyone know where we're leading into for our next session.
I'm really, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
But,
Gonna give everyone
technology, we love our technology.
there you go. You should have
Technology.
Do we have it?
You should have the ability now.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let me just bring in our leadership reel here for a second. Those of you who have joined us previously, we kind of danced around here a little bit between initiating, maintaining productivity. We were talking about inspiring and holding a vision. I want you all to look out for the recordings of those really, really interesting discussions we've already had. We're talking about empathy, recognizing and expressing empathy last time. And of course, today got us into the communicating here in Bright Green. Meredith coordinated that so nicely with her top today. So here's the Bright Green communicating verbal and written. We're actually jumping yet again into the interesting topic of embodying resilience and grit for next session. That will be on May 29th. And I wanted to also give everyone a chance to reach out here to all of our panelists. We're missing Marilyn here today, but you have individually an opportunity always to touch base and circle back with any of our panelists here. Please also do know that we do post today's recording and previous recordings on the Prickly Pear page on LinkedIn that you can find there. And we have a little discussion group also that we started as the Brain Diverse Leadership Collective. So please do also check out for some contributions there, and just keep continuing to participate in the discussion. On that note, I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank you, our distinguished panelists today, for your engaged contributions, and look forward to meeting again here at the same place. We will again let you all know the next session will follow on May 29th, and we're excited to explore the resilience and grit of our leadership wheel then. And on that note, we wish you a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and look forward for you to join us again in May. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye.
be great, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.